Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Judy Van Rest, Executive Vice President of IRI, and I welcome you here this morning for a session with members of the United Democratic Forces of Belarus. We are very pleased today to have members of the coalition here. We have been working with members such as Anatoly and Vinsuk for well over a decade, and for me it has a special significance because I remember when we started out working in Belarus, the difficulties, and even though it's a certainly less than perfect situation today, I must say that there has been a lot of good things accomplished. Part of it being that the coalition has really worked very hard to stay together and work together and turn into a very strong force in Belarus. So our group here today will talk about the situation in Belarus, and I think that you've had a very good week of thus far with meetings on the Hill and with the media. And this is an opportunity for all of you in the audience to ask the questions about what it looks like today. I think it's certainly a much more hopeful situation than it has been in the past, in spite of Lukashenko still being in power. Let me introduce our participants. Sergei Kaliakhin, Irina Kozlina, Anatoly Lebedko, Sergei Moshkevich, and Vinsuk Viatorka. Mr. Viatorka is going to begin with some remarks, and Ms. Kozlina will follow, and then we'll have a Q&A session, and Steve Nix, our director of the Eurasia Division, will moderate that session. So without further ado, Vinsuk, if you would like to start. Either one. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all express our common gratitude to the International Republican Institute for its constant concern on Belarus and its democratic future, its assistance to democratic forces in staying united, in elaborating good and modern strategies for Belarus. The events of March-April 2006 had substantially changed the political self-perception of Belarus society. The first time during long years, the people of various age, education, and social groups showed their ability to defend their values. Dozens of thousands had overcome their fear. Despite intimidation and repression against the activists, thousands of whom were arrested, including present here, detained or dismissed from their job, many, first and foremost young people, joined democratic parties and other organizations. The democratic forces became a political subject in Belarus again. This is the solid basis for further democratic developments in our country. There is another side of the moon. Unfortunately, until now, there are political prisoners, at least 8 of them, spend their terms in prisons, in lager, and we will speak about this as well. Mrs. Kozlina is here to raise our common voice in this matter. However, the recent developments in Belarus and around it push to speak about a wider range of factors forming the political landscape there. The situation within and around our country has been changed substantially since January the 1st. Lukashenko has found himself under strong pressure of Russia, which more closely resembles blackmail. The relationships between official Moscow and Minsk grew unexpectedly cool. The growth of gas prices is used not in order to push Minsk toward market and democracy, but with a view to take over the gas and oil transportation and proceeding infrastructure, as well as force Minsk to introduce Russian ruble. Lukashenko, who is responsible for leading the country to this dead end, tries now to continue the risky bargaining with Russia and with Europe for eternal personal power. The energy war between Kremlin and Lukashenko continues, but there is a temporary truce for approximately 2 years, or 18 months, during which Moscow will solve its own political problems. At the same time, Lukashenko will be further driven into the corner. For the first time during the last dozen of years, the ruling regime is forced to find a way from the deadlock, for which it takes responsibility itself. The choice is very clear. Either Belarus keeps its independence as a democratic country, or it increases step by step its dependence on Russia and remains a dictatorship. In our country, undoubtedly, the situation in economy and around energy market became the predominant subject of the public debate. The independence of Belarus became the matter of consensus. Even Lukashenko, who played the card of nostalgia on Soviet Union during a long time, does not afraid now to use the very word independence. This shows again that the problems of economy and thus the policy, the politics, the political independence are important for the society. People also realize the crucial dependence of current economic model on energy and fuel deliveries. The society is hungry on new information and forecasts. And I'd like to say alternative proposals of another vision of Belarus' future. People are ready to perceive alternative ideas. I, as well as my colleagues and friends, visited hundreds of households in Minsk city this January when so-called local electoral campaign took place in Belarus. People asked me about their main concerns: new gas and oil prices, their influence on economic situation and economic independence of our country, the increase of communal tariffs, and the openness of Belarus to other than union with Russia, geopolitical options. Lukashenko failed in leading the country back to the Soviet past and using the demagogy of Slavic brotherhood with Russia. The people, as a rule, realized this and they are disappointed with Lukashenko policy leading the country to the deadlock. However, they need to see another alternative vision, the political forces which provide the society with clear answer what to do further may win people's consciousness. So that the main challenge for Belarus democratic forces now is to elaborate, to adopt, and to deliver the proper message to the people. The anti-crisis strategy adopted by the United Democratic Forces last June on a large scale meets the requirements to this message. We raise our voice for carrying out democratic reforms both in public life and in economy. Our main slogan for freedom is aimed at more democratically advanced groups. We estimate their percentage to more or less the quarter of the society, 25%. By the way, according to still existing independent sociological groups, the real voting for Alexander Milenkevich was about 19.5%, and for Kazulin, Alexander Kazulin, around 7%. So you see in some the same 26%. But apart from another another quarter of the society, which is irrationally pro-Lukashenko, another 50% exist. These people rather pragmatically, not to say cynically, stayed aside from politics, being convinced that relative stability is eternal. Now they are forced to think deeper about the further developments in our country. And Our main challenge now is to convince the more passive part of the society that the democratic change may lead to stable welfare. The message is to be perceived not by Lukashenko, but by our society, including its key socio-economic groups. The workers and engineers of major enterprises, which now are under the threat of closure, the urban population as a whole, all the group of youth, the small entrepreneurs or small vendors, who are the only socio-economic group ready to defend its interests by direct actions of protest. This message must be heard and regarded by ruling groups and directors of large industries who now began to think about another way of development of Belarus. But I do think they cannot be the force able to change our country without the momentum produced by the democratic forces. As for Lukashenko, he remains unchangeable. Even ordinary people in Belarus know that Lukashenko is tossing now, but, however, only on words, no redundant illusions. There are still political prisoners in my country. The only way for whom to call to the justice is a hunger strike. On the one hand, Lukashenko, a couple of weeks ago, went on to propose borrowing European solutions, citing Finland, Sweden, Germany, France, and Poland as possible examples for solving Belarus' economic problems, and even didn't reject the introduction of euro in the future. On the other hand, mass arrests of the young front leaders and searches in the apartments of NGOs last month were carried out by KGB, and new additional political prisoners may shortly appear in our country. Internal influence and future of the democratic forces of Belarus directly depends on their ability to stay united and to face a new challenge. I suppose the democratic forces are in position to elaborate in details and to bring an alternative vision to all the mentioned groups of the society. The 7th Congress of Democratic Forces and the street actions on March the 25th and April 26th, scheduled for the next months, will be used to adapt and proclaim such a new strategic message. Since 1996, the Congresses of Democratic Forces serve as tools to solve the most important for the democratic camp problems. This year, the Congress is prepared on a clearly democratic way. The delegates for it were selected according to their support from the common people. Each of the delegates collected at least 300 signatures of voters during the recent local campaign as a contender to become a local councillor, or 300 signatures for support of the United Democratic Forces message for freedom. Thus, the composition of the new Congress will reflect the real human resource and influence of the political groups. This will allow forming a new composition of political council of democratic forces in order to improve decision-making and coordinating of activities. However, the matters of internal organization of the opposition aren't in the focus of public interest. The strategic aim of the democratic forces now is to lead the country to the situation of round table with the authorities and or to free and fair parliamentary elections in the end of the next year. The destiny of Belarus is to be solved in Belarus by Belarusians' brain and hands. We have the vision what to do for the next 24 months. And we do hope for the understanding and solidarity of the democratic world. Thank you very much.
My first concern is about political prisoners. I don't know another country in Europe where people have no right to express their own issues, their political things, which don't coincide with presidential issues. As you know, in Belarus, nowadays there are 9 persons who are sentenced to different terms of imprisonment for their political issues. But the authorities don't recognize the fact that they have political prisoners. Do you hear me? No. Do you hear me? Yeah? Thank you. Maybe I'll turn the microphone closer to me. Oh, thank you. Is it better? I think that yes. There are 9 people who are in prison now. Alexander Kazulin is among them. Tomorrow, it will be exactly a year from the time when he was arrested and beaten by special forces, being a presidential candidate. It was very difficult times. During the months of presidential elections, all the progressive people in Belarus felt tremendous pressure. More than 1,000 people were detained, and as I understand now, when people are sentenced to 15 days of imprisonment, we don't feel that it's very long term. We are getting accustomed to this kind of pressure, unfortunately, and it's awful, of course, for European country. My husband was arrested while a mass demonstration, 25th of March, and in July he was sentenced for 5.5 years of imprisonment. While being in jail, he made the political hunger strike during 52 days. Do you remember when I woke up in the morning and counted a lot of the number of days he was on hunger strike? I can't imagine that a man can do it. But nevertheless, when a person has an idea, when he has a God in his heart, he can do a lot. His demand was one of the countries had to raise the questions of Belarusian violation of human rights in Belarus on Security Council in United Nations. And do you know, when I met him at the end of the January, it was a planned meeting with him for 3 days. The first question I asked him was, did you really decided to die? He answered me this way: when it was 45th or 49th day of hunger strike, it was very difficult, but immediately I understood something very important. If I made everything on this, it's time to go away. But if I have anything to do yet, God will save me. And God saved him, thanks to United States. Because you know that it were United States who raised the question at the United Nations. And I'm grateful very much to United States and to every citizen of USA, and personally to people who could move the question, push the question to the Council. What is important now? People are in prison. They have no opportunity to telephone to their families. They have no opportunity to get information, to meet friends and families, very rare only. And what concerning my husband, after so long hunger strike, he restores his health, but of course it's impossible to do it in the prison. That's why our aim is to do everything we can and everything that we can't, possible and impossible, to do this way in order to take the people from the jail. I want to remember you that there are 9 people in Belarus who are in the prison on political issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kazulino, and thank you, Vinsuk, for both of your remarks. Now, before we start the Q&A session, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that this trip of the opposition leaders is sponsored by the National Endowment for Democracy, which is represented today by Barbara Haig, and I believe Roger Pataki is here as well. So our thanks go out to the NED for their support, very important support in this effort. USAID is also a funder of IRI's program in Belarus, and Alexander Brzezinski and Alex Sokolowski are both here today, and our thanks go out to you as well for this important support. We'll open it up to questions. We'd ask that anyone who does have a question, if you would please identify yourself, the organization that you represent, and also please do direct your question at a specific delegation member if you so desire. So with that, we'll open up to questions. Yes. Oh, we need a microphone.
Good morning. Asta Panonis with Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. There is a upcoming Congress, as Mr. Vecherka has described. Will your platform then be changed or in any way confirmed by the delegates that are coming? And how many delegates do you expect? It was described that each delegate will have the backing of 300 signatures. But how many in total do you believe you'll have from across the country? And are you well represented across the country, or is it just certain regions that are responding to your message?
Радіо Свобода. Питання наступне. Ось Господар Вечерка казав, що буде конгрес. І питання таке. Ось ваша платформа, ваша програма діяння, ці збираєтеся ви її яким чином там міняти на конгресі, ці, наоборот, підтверджати ту програму, яка була раніше. І так само питання про кількість делегатів конгресу. Ми зрозуміли, що кожен делегат має за собою 300 чоловік, 300 підписів, але скільки їх буде усього і як вони розмірковані по країні.
Did you have your question designed for a particular member? Just Serhii?
Хто хоче, може відказати.
Serhii. Oh, on this one.
Я хотел бы начать с того, что перед першим конгрэсам, ён для нас 6-й по ліку, было шмат галасоў, што розныя ідэалагічныя сілы не могуць выпрацоўваць супольныя праграмы.
I would like to start with saying that before the first Congress, or actually it's the 6th already for the democratic forces, there were quite many opinions that different political forces cannot work out a common platform.
Кангрэс гэта абверг, таму што ён прыняў супольную платформу, за якую прагаласавалі ўсе дэлегаты кангрэса.
And actually we proved the opposite by the first Congress because we managed to adopt the common platform and all delegates of the Congress voted for it.
І мы заходзім з таго, што у нас ёсць пазітыўны станоўчы досвед працы.
So we have the positive experience of our work.
Зараз працуе канстытуцыйная група, якая распрацоўвае праект малой канстытуцыі.
Now we have a constitutional group working. We are working out a draft small constitution.
Фактычна размова ідзе пра частку палітычнага пагаднення у ўсёй кааліцыі.
In fact, we are talking about a part of political agreement of the whole coalition.
І гэты дакумент разлічаны на пераходны этап,
This is a document designed for the transition period.
і ён зафіксуе адзіную пазіцыю усіх суб'ектаў кааліцыі па гэтаму вельмі важнаму пытанню.
It will state the common position of all entities of the coalition on this very important issue.
Сёння у кожнага суб'екта кааліцыі ёсць свае адценні бачання гэтага пытання.
At present, every entity of the coalition has its own shades of vision of this issue.
Але калі працаваць з насельніцтвам, то тут павінна быць адна пазіцыя.
But if we work with the people, with the population, we should have one common position.
І да 17 сакавіка праца па малой канстытуцыі будзе завершана.
And we will finish our work for the small constitution till the 17th of March.
І гэта вельмі важна, таму што ўсё большая колькасць людзей разумее, што на пытанне не толькі ў асобе, але ў сістэме арганізацыі улады і кіравання.
And this is very important because more and more people get the understanding that not only the issue of personality is very important, but also the issue of systematic management of structures is important.
Я думаю, што было б неправільным, калі б мы жылі толькі сённяшнім днём і толькі рыхтавалі, якім чынам атрымаць перамогу. Досвед Украіны сведчыць, што патрэбна мець ясную праграму наступных дзеянняў.
I think it would be a mistake if we would live only by today and would think only about preparing victory, because also Ukrainian experience demonstrates that we really need to think about the future and to prepare the bright future for our country.
І працуе другая рабочая група, якая рыхтуе адказы на тыя злабадзённыя пытанні сацыяльна-эканамічнага зместу, якія сёння хвалююць людзей.
There's also another working group acting in the democratic forces now. This group is preparing answers to the most urgent economic and political questions which exist in Belarus today.
Гэта і тое, што мы называем пазітыўнай альтэрнатывай сацыяльна-эканамічнага зместу.
This is what we call a positive alternative of social and economic issues.
А пра арифметику дэлегатаў скажа Сергей Калякин.
And Sergei Kalyakin is going to talk about delegates and how it works.
Но я не только про арифметику. Я хотел бы сказать, что кроме этого, объединенными демократическими силами разработана стратегия наших действий и имеется план действий, который утвержден и согласован всеми, кто входит в объединенные демократические силы. И по ним, в принципе, нету разногласий. Поэтому это тоже, но пока это документ, который был принят руководителями, это приняло 10 человек.
Not only about it, but also I would like to add that the United Democratic Forces has actually worked out and adopted, signed the strategy of our actions, plan of our actions, but now this is a document which is actually agreed upon and signed by only leaders, 10 leaders of our entities of the coalition.
Сегодня люди в регионах иногда говорят, ну вы разработали ее, стратегию, план, вот вы выполняете.
Sometimes our people in the regions would say like, well, you worked out the strategy, so you are the people who should implement it.
Поэтому мы считаем, что очень важно такие документы, как стратегия и план действий, утвердить на очень широком форуме, именно теми людьми, которые будут мотором в организации выполнения этих очень важных программных документов.
So we think it is very important that people, regional people who are going to be the engines of implementing our strategy should adopt such a strategy and plan of action at some kind of a very broad forum.
Выдвижение делегатов на Конгресс проходило по очень демократичной и всем понятной процедуре.
It was a very democratic and transparent procedure to nominate delegates for the Congress.
Каждый человек, независимо, член партии, он член НЖО, либо просто это активный гражданин Республики Беларусь, мог принять участие в том, чтобы стать делегатом Конгресса.
Any person, no matter if he is a member of any party or a non-governmental organization, or just an active person, just active citizen of the Republic of Belarus, any person could try to become a delegate to the Congress.
Но для этого он должен был сначала проделать определенную работу с людьми и заручиться как минимум поддержкой 300 человек, о чем говорил Винсу Кючер.
He needed to do some work with the people and to get backing of at least 300 people.
Таких людей, которые активно хотели стать делегатами Конгресса, было около 750 человек.
And there were about
всей республике.
750 people all over the country who tried to become delegates of the Congress.
Но не все из них станут делегатами Конгресса.
But actually not all of them would finally end up as delegates of the Congress.
Потому что нами была создана специальная наблюдательная комиссия, которая следит с представителей всех вот политических партий, объединений общественных, которые входят в объединенно-демократические силы, которая следит за соблюдением процедур.
Because we have created a monitoring commission which consists of representatives of all political parties and NGOs which are members of the coalition, which is actually monitoring and observing how the procedures are followed.
На момент нашего отъезда, нашей вот центральной наблюдательной, такие комиссии были не только в центре созданы, но и на местах. Это нечто похожее на избирательные комиссии, которые есть в любой стране в ходе выборов.
We have created not only the central commission like that, but also in the region. So it's some kind of resembles the central election commission in the country.
По данным нашей центральной наблюдательной комиссии, на момент отъезда 546 человек стали уже делегатами Конгресса.
So when we went here to Washington, we knew that according to the data of the Central Election Monitoring Commission, 546 delegates are already confirmed delegates of the Congress.
И еще 37 человек, документы их рассматривались дополнительно, изучались.
And there are 37 more people whose documents are still being studied.
Таким образом, максимально может быть количество делегатов Конгресса 583 человека.
So the maximum which we could have would be 583 delegates.
Эти люди по всем регионам, из больших и малых городов, из столицы, областных центров, просто сельской местности.
These are people from all different regions, from the capital, from big cities, from small towns, from rural areas.
Ну, для примера, одну цифру могу сказать, что 73 человека представляют столицу, город Минск. Это менее 12%.
For example, I can give you one figure. 73 persons actually represent Minsk city. So this is less than 12% of all delegates of the Congress.
Есть проблема, которую надо сказать, что включились в эту работу, к сожалению, не все вот люди, которые могли, а в основном это были активисты политических партий.
There is a certain problem which I should mention. Unfortunately, not all people who could do this work actually tried to do it. The majority of them were representatives of political parties.
Сегодня мы рассматриваем вопрос, как добавить к существующим делегатам представителей неправительственных организаций. Может быть, около 100 человек, основных неправительственных организаций.
Now we're discussing the issue how maybe we could add some more delegates who would represent NGOs to the delegates of the Congress, maybe about 100 people like that.
Опыт у нас такой есть, мы так сделали в прошлый Конгресс в 2005 году, когда избирали единого кандидата.
We have such an experience. We did that in 2005 when we added some NGO delegates to the Congress.
По моему мнению, состав делегатов и порядок их избрания позволяет этим людям, это наиболее активные люди, которые захотели быть на Конгрессе, захотели принимать политические решения. Он позволяет этому составу делегатов выступать от имени Объединенных Демократических Сил и принимать решения.
So the people who actually became delegates to the Congress, they are the most active people. In our opinion, this kind of composition of the Congress, those delegates are really the people who deserve to represent the United Democratic Forces. Thank you.
Я тут бы добавил, что разглядается и такая революційна пропанова додать до гэтых дэлегатаў Кангрэса тых, хто прымаў удзел на мінулым Кангрэсе.
I would also add that now we are also considering such a revolutionary proposal to add delegates of the former Congress to this new Congress.
Тады здымаюцца усякія пытанні наконт прадстаўніцтва.
Then we would solve all questions and issues about representativity.
Правда, при умове, што калі будуць галасавацца кадравыя пытанні, то гэтым правам будуць валодаць толькі тыя, хто прайшоў праз працэдуру, якая была ўзгоднена і пад якой паставілі подпіс усе лідары коаліцыі.
But still there is a condition that the personality issues would be voted on only by people who went through this procedure, which was agreed on by all leaders of the coalition.
Okay, thank you. Who else has a question?
Дякую. Кого ще питання?
Питання є? Yeah.
Alex Sokoloski, USAID. Мне хотелось бы задать, может быть, щекотливый, но, по-моему, важный вопрос. Я не мог не заметить, что с вами сегодня не присутствует господин Милинкевич. И много уже было написано о возможном расколе среди демократов в Беларуси сейчас. Какие ваши отношения с Милинкевичем сейчас? И какие у вас есть планы о переговорах с ним? In English, I'll just translate for myself. I wanted to ask perhaps a delicate but I think important question, which is I couldn't help but notice that I don't see Mr. Milinkevich with you in your delegation today. And I've already read quite a bit about possible divisions within Democrats in Belarus. So I just wanted to ask about what your relations are with Milinkevich right now and what plans you have for further negotiations with him. Thanks.
Я начну, коллеги добавят мне. Во-первых, хочу сказать, у нас хорошие отношения с Александром Милинкевичем.
I would like to say once again we have good relations with Alexander Milinkevich.
Он сегодня председатель политического совета Объединенных демократических сил.
Today he holds the post of chairman of the political council of the United Democratic Forces.
Мы практически каждую неделю встречаемся и решаем какие-то вопросы.
We meet practically every week. We solve our issues.
Александр Милинкевич был приглашен в эту поездку так же, как и мы.
Alexander Milinkevich was invited to go on this trip just as we were.
Но он принял решение не ехать. Почему? Это вопрос ему, я не хочу за него отвечать.
He decided not to come. Why? This is a question to him. I don't want to answer for him.
Но у нас, надо понимать, демократическая коалиция. То есть у нас не может быть так, что один сказал, все построились как солдаты и куда-то пошли. Мы собираемся демократию строить в Беларуси.
We are a democratic coalition. We are trying to build democracy in Belarus. So it's not like somebody ordered and we all as soldiers just go somewhere.
Поэтому у нас есть разные взгляды, в том числе на проведение Конгресса. У нас нет взглядов разных на стратегию, на план действий, значит, на то, что нужна альтернатива для Белоруссии.
So we may have different approaches to some things, although we have common views about strategy, about plan of action, about positive alternative for Belarus.
Но у нас есть разные взгляды на, я говорю, Конгресс, на том, что он должен принимать решения. Один из них я назову.
But we have some different views about the Congress, for example, about what kinds of decisions it should make. And I would give you one example.
Я считаю, что коалиция может держаться вся, это коалиция разных политических партий с разными взглядами, с разными лидерами, скажем так, нацеленная на одну цель – свержение диктатуры и переход к демократии.
I think that our coalition is a coalition of different political parties with different political views, different leaders, let's say, but we have one goal to destroy dictatorship and to bring democracy.
Вот она может объединяться и строиться, эффективно работать вокруг цели единой, которая нас объединяет.
So the coalition can unite and work effectively around this common goal, which unites all of us.
Вокруг единой стратегии, вокруг единого плана, по которому мы работаем.
Around common strategy, around common plan of action, and we work according to it.
Александр считает, что надо выстроить демократическую вертикаль, как Лукашенко, во главе которой должен стоять конкретный человек, которому должны все беспрекословно подчиняться, и тогда будет успех.
Alexander believes that we need to build a democratic vertical, just as Lukashenko built his vertical, and everybody should obey this person who would be the head of the vertical, and this way we can move on.
Поэтому он считает, что Конгресс должен избрать лидера с широкими полномочиями.
That is why he thinks that the Congress should elect a leader with wide powers.
Я так не считаю, к примеру, еще раз говорю, почему я думаю, что вопрос персональный как раз-таки может развести коалицию и повредить ей.
I don't think so. Vice versa, I believe this personality issue can actually harm the coalition.
У нас идет дискуссия, мы ищем компромиссы, вопрос не закрыт.
We are having a discussion. We are
В
looking
частности,
for
вот
compromises.
Венцук-Вечерко внес конкретное предложение по разрешению вот этой ситуации. Поэтому трагедии никакой нет. Я считаю, это очень нормально. Было бы трагедия, если бы мы вообще думали все одинаково, как бы, или там подчинялись бы одному человеку.
The question is still not closed. For example, Vinsuk Vechorka just made a proposal, and I think it's quite rational. So it's not a tragedy. We are still discussing. I think it would be vice versa a tragedy if we would have the same views, absolutely the same ideas.
Я позволю также несколько реплик.
Just a couple of remarks.
Мое глубокое убеждение, что дискуссия – это есть спутник демократии, а не кризиса.
It is my deep conviction that discussion actually accompanies democracies and not crises.
Мы 13 лет последних живем с одним мнением, с одной позицией и с полным отсутствием всякой дискуссии.
For the last 13 years, we're actually living in a country with one opinion, one position, and without any kind of discussion.
А другое дело, что есть временные рамки любой дискуссии.
It's another thing that any discussion has its time frames.
И пришло время ее заканчивать.
And it's time to kind of finish it.
И точку может поставить только Конгресс.
And the Congress can be the event which can put an end to it.
Потому что в Беларуси нет другой структуры, такой площадки наиболее представительной и легитимной, как Конгресс Земсил.
Because in Belarus, the Congress of Democratic Forces is the most legitimate and the most representative place, forum.
На Конгрессе, я хочу напомнить, мы избирали единого кандидата в президенты.
During the last Congress, I would like to remind you, we were electing the single candidate for the president.
Но не английскую королеву и не демократического команданта.
We were not electing the British Queen or democratic commander.
Я бы сегодня сравнил ситуацию с велосипедной гонкой.
I would compare the situation to a bike race.
Впереди Александр Миленкевич.
Alexander Milenkevich is ahead.
Где-то рядом с ним Александр Козулин.
Alexander Kazulin somewhere close to him.
А дальше тоже шуршит колесами пелетон.
And then you know there are more bikers to come.
Никто не давал никому никаких индульгенций.
Nobody gave any indulgences.
Если ты не работаешь, не крутишь педали,
if you don't work, if you don't ride this bike,
тебя настигнет пелетон.
then you know some other people would come.
Сегодня есть кандидаты в лидеры.
Now, today we have candidates for leadership.
И мы говорим совершенно искренне, мы удовлетворены и рады тем, что ни Козулин, ни Миленкевич не ушли из большой политики.
And we are really honest, we are really sincere when we say that we are happy that neither Kazulin nor Milenkevich left the big politics.
Потому что на них работали тысячи и тысячи людей. Это наши инвестиции, и мои, и Калякина, и Вечерка, и людей, которые стоят за нами, в этих людей.
Because thousands and thousands of people worked for them. This is our investment, my investment, Vechorka's, Kalyakin's investment, and investment of thousands of other people who worked for those people.
Мы найдем согласие во всем, кроме одного.
We will find agreement in everything except for one thing.
Мы никогда не согласимся с языком ультиматума.
We would never agree with the language of ultimatums.
Okay, nicely done, both of you. Vinsuk, may I comment the question?
A couple of words. Because it would be better to speak about strategy, not about organizational configurations within the democratic forces. I do think the campaign for the single candidate promotion a year ago was the best one in the history of democratic forces. All the political parties, a lot of non-governmental initiatives had showed a joint effort in order to demonstrate both strategic and personal alternative to the existing regime. What we have now is maybe a kind of reaction after such an effort, but we are obliged in current circumstances to find a new agreement which would reunite us, because only the joint effort and remaining plurality may cover all the society of Belarus. That was why I've proposed an organizational compromise, according to which it is senseless to solve the matter of leadership, formal or informal leadership, on a Congress. We must marginalize this question or agree about delay of it. And the main objective of a Congress is to adapt and announce a strategy, a message, As for the organizational matters, we should find a way to use the popularity, the recognition of Milinkevich as an undoubted resource, and to provide him with a position which would proper for him and with which he would agree before the Congress. Let's say the full-fledged representative of the United Democratic Forces. But at the same time, the political parties, the large political parties, may take a lot of organizational responsibility for coordination and executive mission within the coalition. But all the things are to be agreed before the Congress. The Congress must only to stamp them, or not to stamp, but without such a preliminary agreement, it is risky to carry out the Congress. This is my proposal now. I do hope that all will diminish their ambition in order to carry out our main mission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments, and I think we're all pleased to hear that the dialogue continues and that you continue to work through these issues and are dedicated to the unity of the democratic forces.
Дякую велике. Ми вельми радуємося почути, що ви працюєте працювати на одинство демократичних сил.
Okay, looks like we have time for two questions. It looks like we'll try to squeeze in three, but we'll start with this gentleman up front.
Ramunas Kondratas, Joint Baltic American National Committee. Two short questions. One related to your Congress. It's hard to think that Lukashenko and his KGB are just sitting by and watching this whole nice process, democratic process, evolve. What kind of obstacles are you facing? And two, yesterday I saw on the Lithuanian Delphi site, you probably didn't have a chance to see that Lithuania is thinking about some kind of end game for Lukashenko. Are you thinking about some kind of end game for Lukashenko?
Група, значить, два питання там коротких було. Перше питання, що зрозуміло, що Лукашенко просто не сидить і не глядить на то, як ви так чудовно все робите і об'єдновуєтеся. Тому питання таке, які є перешкоди у вас. І по-друге, вот я уже прочитала, я думаю, что вы не имели такого шансу, что Литва спробует некую там гоню сыграть с Лукашенко. Вот что вы на этого думаете?
Кто будет выступать?
Ну, скажем так, мы понимаем, что он не просто сидит. В период кампании избирательной последней президентской 1000 активистов были арестованы. 1000 человек.
We understand that Lukashenko is not just sitting and looking at us. During the last presidential campaign, thousands of activists were arrested.
В тюрьме находится Александр Козулин, которому отмерили 5,5 лет.
He is sentenced to 5.5 years of imprisonment.
Еще 8 человек находятся сегодня в тюрьме по политическим мотивам.
There are 8 more people in prison now for political reasons.
В государстве не регистрируются общественные организации и политические партии новые.
NGOs and political parties, new ones, are not registered. Just they refuse to register them.
А участие в незарегистрированной организации влечет тюремное заключение, это довольно длительный срок.
And participation in an unregistered organization is punished by prison for quite a long term.
Людей хватают за все, что угодно.
People are detained for
За раздачу газет легально, пока еще существующих в Республике Беларусь. За то, что собрались где-то в каком-то месте, даже дома, больше там 10 человек. Поэтому режим репрессивный, если бы у нас все было нормально, мы бы, может, и не были в оппозиции.
So the regime is repressive. If everything was so good, we wouldn't be members of opposition probably.
Трудно, но в этих условиях Лукашенко уже начинает проигрывать, мы это видим.
It is difficult, but even in such conditions, Lukashenko starts to lose. We see it.
И сегодня, по нашему глубокому убеждению, момент настолько благоприятный, которого не было уже 10 лет в Республике Беларусь, для того, чтобы избавиться от диктатуры.
It is our deep conviction that today the moment is so favorable that it is the first time in 10 years probably that we have such a moment to get rid of dictatorship.
Калі вы паглядзіце фільм «Плошча» і пачытаеце кнігу «Плошча» Каліноўскага, то вы зразумееце, што нішто і ніхто не можа астанавіць людзей, якія захварэлі вірусам свабоды.
When you see the movie The Square and read the book Kalinowski Square, you will understand that nothing can stop people who got this virus of freedom.
Мы прошли праз усё.
We went through everything.
Про скрадание и забойство наших коллег.
Through abduction and murder of our colleagues.
Праз доўгія тэрміны турэмнага знявольвання.
Through long terms of imprisonment.
У Беларусі гэта не працуе.
This doesn't work in Belarus anymore.
Што датычыць Літвы,
As for Lithuania,
вернемся, з'ездзім у Вільню,
we'll come back to Belarus, we'll go to
паразмаўляем з людзьмі ва
Vilnius,
ўрадзе і парламенце.
we'll talk to people in the government and the parliament.
Да гэтага часу у нас было поўнае паразуменне з людзьмі, якія ва ўладзе і ў апазіцыі па беларускаму пытанню.
Up to the present, we had complete understanding with people both in the parliament and in the government about the Belarusian issue.
Я выключаю, што тыя людзі, якія сёння ва ўладзе ў Літве, будуць гуляць у нейкія закулісныя гульні.
I exclude the fact that people who are in power in Lithuania now will play some kind of behind-the-scenes games.
The democracy in Belarus, the democratic perspective of Belarus and its independence are interconnected and interdependent values. And I do think it is good to keep some ties with Minsk on the technical level, let's say in the question of energy deliveries. But as for political level, as for such things like contacts with the first regime people, this signal would be wrong without obvious steps of the regime towards democracy. Let's say if they release our political prisoners, it's a good ground for a real and promoted political contacts, but not earlier.
Okay, we had a question here, and we'll get to you, Leanne, I promise. In the back, please.
Kathy Kosman, U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. A couple of points. One is, it seems to me that, and please tell me if I'm wrong, that the welfare state in Belarus is paid for by Belarus reselling Russian oil, which it doesn't use. If that's true, it seems to me, why don't you turn to, and maybe you are, to the trade union movement, which was very strong in the early days, in the early 90s, and presumably some remnants of that still remain in Belarus. The other question is, Belarus is distinguished by the most repressive religion law in Europe. It seems to me that disaffected religious communities, of whom there are many in Belarus, and some leaders of them were imprisoned briefly last year, would be another natural constituency for you. It seems to me it might be more useful to look to mobilization for support rather than fighting over leadership questions.
Хто буде виступати?
Ми не знаємо поки
Я
вопросу.
зараз перекладу спочатку питання. До всіх видать було питання. Чоловік представляє комісію по міжнародних релігійних свободах. І два питання було. Перше питання таке: ураження складається, що добре економічне становище Білорусі було заплачено войсковість нафти, яку Білорусь брала від Росії і перепродавала, тобто перепродажу. І тоді питання, коли це справді так, то може бути звернутися до профсоюзу, які були на початку 90-х вельми моцні і, може бути, залишаються зараз до цих пор, і працювати з ними, як зі своїми, з одною з цих груп. І друге питання про закон про релігії, який, мабуть, в Європі з'являється самим складанным, самым рестрикційним, і некоторые, наприклад, у минулому году так само лідери релігійних груп, які існують у Білорусі, були на короткі терміни арештовані. Що, здається, це так само добра методова група, з якою можна вельми добре працювати, замість того, і ось мобілізувати ці групи, замість того, щоб змагатися за питання лідерства.
Что касается нефтяного вопроса, действительно так. Получая дешевую нефть практически без пошлин из России, мы получали 19 миллионов тонн нефти. При внутренней потребности нашей 6 миллионов тонн. При этом мы еще сами добываем около 3 миллионов тонн. Таким образом,
As for the oil issue, this is really true because we actually got from Russia about 19 million tons of oil every year without any taxes, basically, although Belarus needs about 6 million. And we also get our own 3 million. So this is true.
таким образом, мы приблизительно 16 миллионов тонн нефти, не только сырой, в том числе нефтепереработки, у нас 2 крупных нефтеперерабатывающих предприятия, мы продавали в Европу, в Англию, в Голландию, в другие страны.
So yes, this is true. About 16 million tons of oil, not only raw oil but also products of oil. Because we have 2 big oil processing companies, we would sell it to Europe, to England, to the Netherlands and other countries.
Дополнительно получая около 4,5 миллиардов долларов США за вот перепродажу практически, за бесплатно.
And this way we would get 4.5 billion US dollars just for nothing, basically.
Бюджет Беларуси 20 миллиардов долларов.
And Belarusian budget is $20 billion.
Понимаете сами, что когда это Россия изъяла, то, безусловно, это повлияет на то, что будет происходить с экономикой Беларуси. И никакого экономического чуда, никакого белорусского экономического чуда не существует.
So you understand when Russia takes it back, this would really influence the economy of Belarus. So there is no Belarusian economic wonder. It does not exist.
На конт другого питання. Ви абсолютно маєте рацію на конт рестрикційного релігійного закону в Білорусі і на конт доброї метової групи для...
About your second question, you are really right when you speak about very restrictive religious law in Belarus and about very good constituency, those religious groups.
Ви ведаеце, грамадскі пратэст у Беларусі гэта ўвогуле мужны ўчынак актывіста. Ён падвяргае не толькі сябе небяспецы, але і сваю сям'ю.
But you know, in Belarus to protest publicly, you need to be really brave as an activist, because this way not only this activist can suffer, but also his family.
І таму колькасць гэтых групаў, якія выказваюць пратэст, ну, не зусім вялікая ў Беларусі. Можна сказаць, што малая.
This is why the number of the groups which really do protest is not that high. There are quite few such groups.
Гэта якраз прадстаўнікі не праваслаўнай рэлігіі у Беларусі.
And these people are normally not representatives of the Orthodox religion.
Вы ведаеце пра беспрэцэдэнтную галадоўку пратэстанцкай царквы «Новае жыццё».
You know about the unprecedented hunger strike of the Protestant
по абароне сваіх правоў.
To defend their rights.
Другая такая група – это дробныя прадпрымальнікі,
the second group which can defend their rights is
якіх дзяржава паставіла на межу выжывання.
Because the state put them on the edge of survival.
І, безумоўна, гэта моладзевыя асяродкі, якія выступалі пасля сакавіцкіх падзеяў з флешмобамі, з іншымі акцыямі пратэсту.
And obviously the third group would be youth groups which were very active after march events with their flash mobs, other public actions.
І мы добра разумеем, што без аб'яднання гэтых сілаў разам у нас не так шмат шансаў для перамогі.
Aware of the fact that if we do not unite all those forces together, we have very little chance for victory.
І таму мне прыемна чуць пра тое, што сёння кажацца, што лідары палітычных партыяў імкнуцца зрабіць усё, каб аб'яднанне наше было рэальным і, галоўнае, каб яно было максімальна шырокім.
That is why I'm very happy to hear today that leaders of our parties try to do everything to make this unity real, first of all, and as broad, as cross-section as possible.
Что датычыць профсоюзаў,
As for the trade unions,
адзін з лідараў незалежнага профсоюзнага руху Александр Бухвостаў з'яўляецца сябрам палітычнай рады аб'яднаных дэмакратычных сілаў.
One of the leaders of the independent trade union movement, Alexander Bukhvostov, is a member of the political council of the United Democratic Forces.
Колькасны склад незалежных профсоюзаў невялікі, это каля 10 000 чалавек.
there are not so many members of independent trade unions, so there are about 10,000 people.
Але пасля таго, як бляск пачынае злізаць з эканамічнага цуда Лукашенка, перспектывы незалежных прафсаюзаў выглядаюць добра.
But after this economic wonder of Lukashenko loses its charm, the prospects of independent trade unions look very great.
І трэба прызнаць, што самы галоўны інтэгратар, чалавек, які аб'ядноўвае розныя структуры і рэлігійныя, і прафсаюзныя, гэта Александр Лукашенко.
And we have to recognize the fact that the main integrator, the person who really unites all different structures, trade union structures, religious structures, and everybody else is Lukashenko.
Падчас майго апошняга знаходжання ў турме ў мяне ў камеры сядзеў і прафсаюзны актывіст, і пратэстант, і некалькі маладых людзей.
Last time when I was in prison, I actually was in the same cell with a member of the independent trade union, a member of a Protestant church, and a couple of young people.
Okay, Leanne had a question.
Yeah, actually two short questions on the subject of young people.
Leanne Dorsey from the United States Department of State.
Leanne Dorsey from the U.S. Department of State, from the Office of the Coordinator of U.S. Assistance to Europe and Eurasia.
Из офиса координатора допомоги Злучених Штатів Європі і Євразії.
On the subject of young people, do you have any sense among your delegates of what kind of representation you have from the young leaders and activists that emerged in the post-election period? And the second question is, among you, is there agreement with Mr. Viacharka's proposal that the difficult issues be resolved before the Congress, and is in fact that a precondition for the Congress or not?
У мене два коротких питання. Перше питання тичиться молоді. Ось наконт делегатів Конгресу, як є у вас які лічби, ці ведаєте ви, колькі прикладно там представлено молоді, молодих лідерів, які з'явилися ось після подіїв Сакавіцьких. А друге питання по пропанові господаря Вечорки, ці серед вас є, ці ви всі згодні з тим, що треба узгоднити усі позиції перед виходом на Конгрес?
As for youth representation, let me put an example of our party, Belarus Popular Front. About half of our delegates are young people. For example, in Minsk, the majority of our candidates in local elections were young people. First of all, those of them who joined the active political life after spring 2006. As for your second question, I think my colleagues will...
Я так само один штрих толькі у горадзе Менску з кандыдатаў у дэпутаты, якія былі зарэгістраваны ад нашай партыі, 16 чалавек, 8 гэта былі маладыя людзі да 25 гадоў.
Just one example as well from my party. In Minsk City, out of 16 candidates for local elections, which were registered candidates for the elections, 8 of them, so half of them were young people. So people under 25.
Што датычыць другога пытання,
As for the second question,
то гэта пазіцыя не Вячоркі, гэта пазіцыя усёй палітычнай рады аб'яднаных дэмакратычных сілаў.
This is not just an opinion of Mr. Vechorko, this is the opinion of the whole political council of the United Democratic Forces.
У нас консенсус, мы можем выносіць на Конгресс толькі тыя пытанні, якія ўзгоднены.
We can put only the issues on the Congress agenda which were previously agreed upon.
Толькі мы прапановваем яшчэ аб'ядноўвацца вакол таго, што аб'ядноўвае.
Because we suggest to unite around things which unite us.
І калі ніхто, уключаючы Александра Міленкевіча, не гаворыць не выпрацоўцы пазітыўнай альтэрнатывы,
and if nobody, including Alexander Milenkevich, says no to development of the positive alternative,
калі усе гавораць, што трэба праводзіць рэформу структур кааліцыі, уключаючы ў іх неўрадавыя арганізацыі і рэгіянальныя кааліцыі,
if everybody says that we need to reform the structures of the coalition to include regional coalitions and NGOs into the structure,
і калі усе гавораць, што стратэгію, план дзеянняў неабходна, каб прыняў Кангрэс,
if everybody says that we need a Congress to adopt the strategy and the plan of action,
то гэта і ёсць повістка дня нового Конгресу,
then this is the agenda of the new Congress.
яку підтримують усі без виключення.
And it is supported by everybody without exclusions.
Треба проводити Конгрес з такою повісткою,
So we need to have a Congress with such an agenda,
і він буде успіховим,
and it will be successful.
тому що тут нема предмету для розходження.
Because there is no point for argument.
І ми тут шукаємо компроміс.
And here we look for compromises.
Okay, I think we're about out of time, so we're going to conclude. Let me conclude by asking you to join me in thanking our panelists for fine presentations and answers to all of your many questions. So for our guests. And thanks to all of you for joining us here today. Thank you.
Спасибо за интерес к Беларуси.
Thank you for your interest in Belarus.
Yes, I.